And camera set and action.
Good morning, Dr. EnRico Melson.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the studio, here with the viewers from YouTube in regards to the many subjects we're covering with integrated medicine and alternative education. I'd like to first invite our viewers, Dr. Melson, to an insight to who you are. As a physician, a medical director and advisor on many boards since 1982, you graduated from the University of California, Irvine School of Medicine. You have been actively practicing medicine for 30 years plus, in which the principal areas have been international health and integrative medicine. Dr. Melson, I also wish to acknowledge that you are also a physician who has been recognised for your duties in humanitarian care, disaster relief, in the war in Lebanon, as a surviving member of the massacre of Sabra and Shatila, of which no doubt you will give our viewers perhaps a small insight to that particular experience. You've travelled 80 countries. As I have reiterated, you have served in professional and humanitarian capacities in a vast majority of those countries. Being back in California and Los Angeles, we are very privileged to have you here today to provide to us an overview of the 7 pillars of integrated educational systems. Dr. EnRico Melson, I would also like to ask you, what is your view on the current educational system in the USA? And if I can ask you this question, and can you provide the viewers today with an overview of the 7 pillars of integrated educational systems? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share. My life's journey has been one of great blessings, great fortune, to have survived many unfortunate circumstances. That's the irony. It underscores the old aphorism that says, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. My early career as a medical professional, particularly in the 80s and the 90s, when I was doing more work in disaster relief, along with forging other careers in telecommunications and in allopathic medicine, as well as in what has become the foundational stages for the systems of consciousness and healing that I've been given the opportunity to bring forth to the world. In those situations, what I came to realize was those disaster environments were all preventable. The people most affected adversely in those disaster environments were also the people who were least educated, who had the least amount of access to information. In cases where disasters were natural in their origin, simple information regarding transportation availability or shifting weather patterns or other available resources for enduring and surviving the onslaughts of these natural disasters were often seemingly available and yet not so available to the people on the ground because of lack of their own education, their inability to read, for example, or their inability to afford the most basic access to the means of communication and information. This is something that we call the digital divide. The digital divide, that which was a phrase coined in 1984 by Sir Donald Maitland of the International Telecommunications Union, when he spoke of this widening gap as we enter this period called the information revolution. Long before the internet itself, yet that which was certainly progenitor to the internet, as we began to understand that computers would soon come into our lives, at least those of us initially in the first waves, in these highly industrialized and advanced societies, supposedly, such as the United States, being, again, such a hallmark for progress, for which the world was to follow by and large. When we consider that this digital divide is something that continues even to this day to expand rather than contract, even though we now have more mobile phones on this planet than we have fixed line phones, even though we have more computers on this planet, even computers brought into villages, than we have ever had in the history of communications technology, going back at least to that which we call the origins and the beginnings of recorded human history. So what we see then is the lack of access to information, to communications technology, and the poor state of the delivery of information called the education system has resulted in deaths, mortality, morbidity, injuries, disasters. Those dimensions of life as sentient beings, of human beings, as members of our ecosystem, those sides of our life, especially associated with great suffering. When we understand that, then we know that much can be done, much should be done, much must be done by all beings who commit themselves to some path of service. That path of service may begin in any area, any sector of society. Yet ultimately that path of service is highly likely to have to include attention, serious attention, in-depth attention to the field of education itself, and how education and learning is essential for further advancing whatever is the nature of that particular mission that that person has elucidated for her or his life. Education, learning. With respect to the system in the United States in particular, what we have today is a system that is actually moribund. It is falling apart. That is no secret. All major sectors of society themselves are in radical transition at this time. Education as well. Learning is being supplanted in many ways. The learning within the formal educational system, the institutions of organized and delivered education that we call school, universities. Much of that education is being supplanted at this time by virtue of the independent initiatives of many who are seeking information and knowledge, however, do not have access either to the resources to pay for tuition, or who for other reasons do not have the inclination to immerse themselves further into a formalistic system of didactic education, which is academically oriented, however, not scholastically oriented. And so in their own ways of learning, people are always seeking learning. They're seeking this learning, as Brother Malcolm X would say, by any means necessary. However, even in the seeking of this learning, even in this proliferation of human initiative, even in this diversification of approaches, the creative approaches and the approaches of great industry, vigor and rigor, together around the world, even in the face of all of this, there are still underlying inherent limitation paradigms that proliferate from what we call the top down, and the United States at least used to represent something called the top in that delivery of education systems. Of course, we know this is no longer the case. As the United States has fallen progressively year after year after year, now in the 194 officially listed nations of the United Nations, the United States ranks something on the order of 43rd or thereabouts in its educational system. It is not simply to recognize that there has been a slippage in status and standing and rank relative to that of other countries, but it's also to recognize that for the most part these paradigms of education, even for the other countries, the vast majority of other countries and cultures on this world, are themselves slipping as well. So we're all sliding. We're sliding into the muck and the mud because there's something that's very important that we have not addressed in these institutionalized approaches to education and in these approaches structurally and technologically to the delivery of a means of communication and the delivery of information. What is that? It is the very capacity of the human being to absorb and to process information. It is the very essence of intelligence. What is the premise upon which we organize and create and structuralize these systems of delivery of education and communication around the world? That approach, unfortunately, is an approach that sees us viewing the capacity of humanity to absorb and to process information as being progressively less and less. We do this in our culture as we entertain people. We do this in our advertising and marketing approaches. We start with assumptions that the human who is to read or listen to our messages, even this very video on YouTube here, there's often the need to, as they say, simplify it. Keep it simple, stupid. This is one of the worst insults you can create and advance to someone. The presumption that the people who are operating on a 6th grade educational level, a 4th grade educational level, and therefore if you deliver your message, your marketing campaign, or your intellectual campaign, or your educational materials, if you deliver it at that level, then you reach the majority of the people. But there's the danger within that strategy, because you may reach the majority of the people, and what you do is resonate within them the limitations of their capacity to further process information on any higher level or vibrational level of awareness. So we must be careful. Yes, things need to be delivered in an efficient way, and at times highly simplified ways. But these must be tied to a presupposition that the capacity to absorb that information and to interlink that information, to link it with so many more dimensions and directions of considerations, extrapolations, interpolations, and syntheses, that these are the natural ways that the mind and the intellectual capacity of humanity are so oriented and gifted naturally. And therefore, we do not operate on the presupposition. We do not teach and deliver educational systems on the presupposition that people are limited in their capacity. What we must deliver is a greater, a far greater, a far more intelligently designed system that actuates, that nurtures, and that cultivates the expansion of that capacity, which is already so far beyond what was the previous assumptions. And by activating the expansion of that capacity, we have innovative and creative delivery systems which bring about the experience of genius as something that is real and inherent and intrinsic, endogenous even, for all humans. And this is a way to consider how we can begin with a system of education in the United States, in the Western world, even in the Eastern world, globally, for the most part, a system that is in need of radical restructuring, a system that is in need very much of evolution, a system that is in need and in great, desperate desire by the vast majority of the people on this planet to feel more enhanced, to feel more fulfilled, to feel that learning is indeed once again restored culturally and throughout this world as something that is cherished, enjoyed, relished, and that in which we can immerse ourselves and have it be truly, truly a major dimension of the new life and the new era, indeed the new epoch into which we are advancing, that which we call the Aquarian Age. I hope this is useful for now.
Thank you, Dr. EnRico Melson, speaking on the
Thank
subject and your views of where the current education system is in America. Thank you very much.